Hey y'all, so in this lesson, I'm going over our very first lesson, which is just on the factoring and solving our trinomials. So here we go. Um, so just a reminder that here, what you see up above, what we're focusing on is here in standard form, right? So standard form, just make sure, right, that our exponents are decreasing. So like see how x has that x to the second power, and x is by itself, so x to the first power, and then c for our constant. Notice how there is no x, so basically, there's just 0. So keep in mind that when factoring and when we get to the solving, that we focus on our standard form. Also in factoring, so that first step, right, we have to make sure that we have, see if we have a GCF. If so, then we're going to divide all those terms by the GCF. But if not, we'll just continue with the factoring. Now, you can do box method, whether A is equal to 1 or greater than 1. But in this video, I will not be focusing on box method. So if you still need help with box method, make sure that you ask your teacher, okay? So either you could focus on box method or, of course, identify A, right? And if A is equal to 1, then you just identify the factors that multiply to get C. So here, remember, right? Multiplying to get C, that last term here, our constant, and adding to get B. So like, for example, let's just say we have x squared plus 5x plus 4, right? So we're looking for what numbers, and this is when we could set up our table, what numbers multiply to get you C, which in this case is 4, and add to get you B, which in this case is our 5. So I could, of course, start listing out the factors of 4. So 4 has 2 and 2, and also 4 and 1. But then they also have to add to give us 5. Well, notice how 2 plus 2 is just 4. So 2 and 2 are not our factors, but 4 plus 1 is 5. So we have the factors of positive 4 and positive 1. So we would write that, right, as x plus 4 and x plus 1. Then, of course, if you're still trying to make sure that you understand, how could we check our work? Go the other direction, right? If I'm saying that that's the factored form, then now you can check by multiplying and using that box method. So I've got x, I've got positive 4, I've got x, and I've got positive 1. Now I just go through and multiply. So x times x, x squared, 4x, 1x, or of course we can just put x, and then 4 times 1 is 4. Then notice, right? Look for those like terms. So I've got x squared plus, 4x plus another x is now going to give me 5x plus 4. So notice how it checks out, and it checks out. So you can, of course, use that to check your work. Now, if A is greater than 1, though, see, notice how A was just equal to 1, then I'm going to show y'all in this video the bottoms up method, okay? So example 1, first off, do we have a GCF? No, because also to notice, right, that here our A, that front, is just 1. So when it's just 1, our leading coefficient, then I'm going to go ahead and set up my table. We're thinking, right, what numbers multiply to get you positive 32 and add to get you 12. So what numbers multiply to get us 32, so we can list those factors, but they also have to add to get us 12. Well, let's see. So 16 and 2, they multiply to get us 32. 8 times 4, they multiply to get us 32. But make sure, right, they have to add to get us 12. So when I add 16 plus 2, well, that gives us 18. So I know that's not it. But 8 plus 4 is 12. So our factors are positive 8 and positive 4. So here I've got x plus 8 and x plus 4. Then, of course, how can we check our work? Then box method, right? Now, I'm not going to do this every time, but just to get y'all in the mode of practicing. So you set up that x and positive 8 and x and positive 4, okay? And then so make sure that you get x squared plus 12x plus 32. So again, notice 1b, right? There is no GCF because notice how our leading coefficient, that a, is 1 again. So I'm going to set up my table. And then again, we're going what numbers multiply to get us that? C, right? So, but negative 24. And what adds to get us our B? So in this case, not 10, right? But negative 10. So notice how when we are multiplying to get a negative, we always need, when multiplying, we need a positive and a negative. Notice how that we're adding to get a negative, right? We have to add to get a negative 10. So I know that my negative will need to be larger because when they add, you still have to have negative left over. So here we go. So let's see. So 24, right? So negative 24. So we could have negative 6 and positive 4, right? Because remember, we need the larger to be negative. Let's see. Negative 8, positive 3, right? Again, we need that larger. I know it's even, so negative 12, positive 2, right? So now as we go through those factors, make sure that we add them. Negative 6 plus 4, that's not going to give us negative 10. Negative 6 plus 4 is negative 2. So I know that doesn't work. Negative 8 plus 3, well, that's going to give me negative 5. So I know that doesn't work. Negative 12 plus 2, there's your negative 10. So negative 12 and positive 2. So again, x minus 12 and x plus 2. That is our factors. Now again, how can you check your work? Multiply them out, right? Set up that box method. So x negative 12 and x and positive 2. So for this one, I'll go ahead and check it, right? Because really the mistakes happen when we have our negatives here. So x times x squared, negative 12x. Here we've got 2x, and negative 12 times 2 is negative 24. Then, of course, notice, right, do we have like terms? Absolutely. So here I've got x squared, negative 12 plus 2, negative 10x minus 24. So notice how it works. So go ahead now and do this you try on your own. Pause the video, try it, and let's see what you get. And here we go. So again, notice how the leading coefficient is 1. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my table, right? What numbers multiply to get you negative 40 and add to get you 6. That's how we're supposed to set this one up. Again, notice how we're multiplying to get a negative, so I know I need a positive and a negative. But notice how they're adding to get a positive, so I know my larger needs to be positive. So like, for example, I could say 10 and 4, right? But the larger needs to be positive, so I'm going to now make the negative 4 because you would get negative 40. And then actually, guys, if you notice, what is 10 plus that negative 4, or 10 minus 4? Your positive 6. So these were the two factors you should have gotten. So in this case, x plus 10 and x minus 4. That's what you should have gotten here. So now, here we go. Notice how the leading coefficient's not 1, right? Notice how the leading coefficient is 3. So GCF, do we have a greatest common factor? Do 3, 11, and 6 have a greatest common factor? Well, no, because the 11's kind of throwing things off. So no GCF. So now you can do, of course, continue on with box method, or I'm going to show y'all and go over the bottoms up. So bottoms up, remember, bottoms up is we take that leading coefficient, so in this case 3, and we're first going to multiply it to our C. So we're going to do A times C, right? So A times C. So now I'm going to rewrite it as x squared plus 11x, but now not plus 6 anymore, right? Because what's 6 times 3? 18. Now notice how that leading coefficient here is 1. So now I'm going to go through, just like before, right, and set up my table. What numbers multiply to get us? 18, and add to get us our B, which is 11. So in this case, let's see. So we've got 6 and 3. What's 6 plus 3? 9. So I know that's not it. Let's see. What other factors? Well, 9 and 2. What's 9 plus 2? 11. So positive 9, positive 2. So I've got x plus 9 and x plus 2. But we're not done because remember, we had a leading coefficient of 3, but we here went down to a leading coefficient of 1. That means we needed to divide 3 by 3, right? 3 divided by 3 is 1. So guess what we need to divide by now? We're going to divide by that leading coefficient, which is the 3. Now we solve. 9 divided by 3 is 3, so x plus 3. Now, can we divide 2 by 3 evenly? No. Bottoms up. We take the bottom number and bring it up. So this becomes 3x plus 2. That is our factored form. Now, what can we do to check our work? Set up the box method. So I've got 3x in positive 2 and x in positive 3. So notice how this is not just x squared, right? 3x squared. Here I've got 2x. Now 3x times 3, 3 times 3 is 9, so 9x. And 3 times 2 is 6. Notice we have like terms to combine. So I've got 3x squared plus 9 plus 2, 11x plus 6. Do they match? Yes. So I know I have the right answer. So now let's go to B. Same thing, right? Notice how our leading coefficient is 2, not 1. Do we have a GCF between 2, 7, and 15? No. They have no common factors. So I'm going to go ahead now and get started. So bottoms up, right? I'm going to take that leading coefficient and first multiply it to C. So A times C. I've got x squared plus 7x minus 30, right? 15 times 2 is 30. Now notice we've got our A back down to 1. So we can set up our table and figure out, right, what numbers multiply to get us, not 30, but negative 30. And then add to get us 7. So what factors could multiply to get us negative 30, right, and add to get us 7? So I know, well, if I'm thinking about this, right, if you got 10 and 3, but remember they have to multiply to get us a negative, so I know one of them has to be negative, right? They have to add to get us positive. That means the larger has to be positive because we need positive left over. So 10 and negative 3. And then, of course, check, right? What is 10 plus negative 3? Positive 7. So positive 10 and negative 3. So x plus 10 and x minus 3. But are we done? No, because remember, we went from 2 to 1. So what do we have to now divide by? We now have to divide by 2, because that was that leading coefficient here. And here we go. 10 divided by 2 is 5. But can we divide negative 3 by 2 evenly? No. So bottoms up. This becomes 2x minus 3. Then, of course, how can you check your work? Set up the box method and multiply. So go ahead now and pause the video here and try the U-try on your own. And here we go. So first off, I notice that A is greater than 1, right? My leading coefficient is 4. Do they have a GCF, our 3 values here? No. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with bottoms up. So x squared minus 15x plus 36 from 9 times 4. Now we can set up our t-chart, right? Because A is now 1. What numbers multiply to get you 36 and add to get you negative 15? This one could be a little tricky, so if you needed to, right, list out those factors. So like I know 9 times 4, right? Now notice how they have to add to get us a negative, but multiply to get you a positive. So that means now both factors have to be negative, right? Because when multiplying, two negatives make a positive. And when you add them, they're going to give you still that negative. But 9 plus 4 is 13, or I'm sorry, negative 13. I need negative 15, so I know that's not it. You should have gotten negative 12 and negative 3. Negative times a negative is a positive, and then negative 12 plus negative 3 gives you that negative 15. So I know here those are the two factors. So x minus 12 and x minus 3. But is this your final answer? No, because then what were you supposed to do? Divide. But now in this problem, what do we divide by? We divide by 4. Why divide by 4? Because the leading coefficient was 4. Now I've got x minus 3 from 12 divided by 4. Can you divide that negative 3 by 4 evenly? Nope. Bottoms up. 4x minus 3 is what you should have gotten. Now, of course, use the box method to check your work. Now we're going to get to the solving part, right? So before we get started, just to make that connection with the actual graph, because the graph is representing the equation. So here the graph is represented by y is equal to x squared plus 4x minus 5. So here we've got this graph, right? This is our what we call our parabola. But let's go ahead, pause the video, factor x squared plus 4x minus 5 on your own, and let's see what you get. Just go ahead and factor it like what we did before. And here we go. So I've got x squared plus 4x minus 5, right? So notice how the a was 1, so I could just go ahead and set up my table. So here I've got what numbers multiply to get you negative 5 and add to get you 4. So notice how we are multiplying to get a negative, so they one has to be negative, one has to be positive. That means you should have gotten, we add to get positive 4, 5, and negative 1. Because that will multiply to get you negative 5. And then what's 5 plus negative 1? Positive 4. So here you've got x plus 5 and x minus 1. So that's what you got factored form. You use the factors positive 5 and negative 1. Now, looking back at the graph, what do you notice about the equation here in factored form, like here that's in green, and the x-intercepts? So remember, x-intercepts, right, is where it's crossing the x-axis. So our graph here, our function, is crossing here at positive 1 and negative 5. So what do you notice the relation here between the x-intercepts and the factored form? Well, if you notice, they're the same numbers, right? We just kind of switched the sign. So instead of a positive 5, we got a negative 5, right? Negative 1, here's a positive 1. Now, to be more specific, guys, right, that's coordinates. So that's not just a negative 5 and 1. This is the coordinates 1, 0. This is the coordinates negative 5, 0. Notice, what do they both have in common? The y coordinate is 0. So that's why here, when we are solving, you have x squared plus 4x minus 5 is equal to y. That y is actually equal to what? 0. So that's why when solving, we have the x plus 5 and x minus 1 is equal to 0. So now when you're solving, you've got x plus 5 is equal to 0 from the zero product property, and x minus 1 is equal to 0. And then you're just solving for x. I subtract 5 from both sides. Notice how there's x is equal to negative 5. You would add 1 to both sides, right? So now notice how you have x is also equal to positive 1. And notice that that was the 2 x-intercept. So notice how we're just solving but equaling to 0 and switching those signs, or in some cases, make sure you're going to solve for x. So again, make sure, right? That's why our equation is always going to equal 0. So now let's go through and actually solve, right? Notice how we have our equation equal to 0. So we are going to solve, but first we have to factor. See how a is just 1? So I'm going to set up my table. Multiply to get us what? 44, positive, good. And then add to get us what? Negative 15, that is your B. So now notice, if I'm going to multiply to get a positive but add to get a negative, both of my factors do have to be a negative. So what are those two factors? Well, think about it. And you should get negative 11 and negative 4. Because notice two negatives make a positive when multiplying, and when you add them, you do get negative 15. So our two factors are x minus 11 and x minus 4. But remember, right, is equal to 0. So is that our answer? Negative 11, negative 4? No. Make sure now, because we're solving, right, that y is equal to 0 and x minus 4 is equal to 0. So when you solve, right, we would add 11 to both sides. We would add the 4 to both sides. And notice how you get x is equal to positive 11 and positive 4. That is the x-intercepts of this equation. So that's what x is equal to. So now let's go to 3b. Now, notice how this setup's a little different, right? See how we've got the distributive property? So think parentheses first. We need to distribute. So x times x, x squared. Then x times 5, 5x is equal to 36. Now here we go. Oh, notice, right? Our equation is equal to 36. What is our equation supposed to equal? 0. So what do we need to do first before we start solving? Subtract 36, because that's how we're going to get 0. So really, we've got x squared plus 5x minus 36. That is what we're going to solve because it has to equal 0, our equation. Now, notice how our a is equal to 1. So let's set up that table. Here we go. What numbers multiply to get us what? Negative 36. Good. And then what add to get us what? Positive 5. So now notice we're multiplying to get a negative. So 1 positive, 1 negative, right? But we have to add to get positive. So the larger number is going to need to be positive. So here we've got, so if you think about it, you should get positive 9 and negative 4. 9 times 4, right? It's 36. But remember, because we need that negative, and when you add, they give you that positive 5. So now here I've got x plus 9 times x minus 4. But is that our final answer? No, right? Because we're solving our equation equal to 0. Now, some of y'all notice the shortcut, right? So here you can just change the signs. But again, I'm still going to show you guys how it's x plus 9 is equal to 0 and x minus 4 is equal to 0. So when you solve, you do get negative 9 and positive 4 from subtracting the 9 and adding the 4. So our final answer is negative 9 and 4. So now let's go to 3C. Here we go. Well, first off, no distribute, right, like 3B. So here we go. But our equation always has to equal what before we get started? 0. So how do we get this to equal 0? Subtract the 6 from both sides. Good. So here we're actually going to solve 5x squared plus 23x plus 12 is equal to 0. Now, notice GCF, right? Because a is greater than 1. Is there a greatest common factor, or is there even a common factor between 5, 23, and 12? No. So just like before, guys, we're going to go ahead now and do bottoms up. So here I've got x squared plus 23x plus 60, right? So, oops, sorry, my pen's starting to wig out on me here. So 23x plus 60 is equal to 0. Now we can set up our table. So what two numbers multiply to get you 60? Oh my goodness, my pen, sorry guys. And add to get you 23. So think about that. And you should get 20 and 3. Because 20 times 3 would get you 60. And what's 20 plus 3? 23. So here I've got x plus 20. Oh, man, my pen is wigging. Sorry, guys. X plus 20 and x plus 3. But now, are we done the factoring? No. Because remember, right, what did we start with? We actually started with a positive 5. So now what do we need to do with our bottoms up? Divide. What do we divide by? Divide by 5. So now we're going to divide by 5. 20 divided by 5 is 4. Oh my goodness, guys, sorry. And then here, can we divide that 3 by 5? No, bottoms up. So 5x plus 3. Now remember, when we were just factoring, we would leave it. But now we need to solve. So here we go. Notice how I could just go ahead and use my shortcut, right, for this first one. So if x plus 4 is equal to 0, that means x is equal to negative 4. But see how we've got 5x plus 3 is equal to 0? So we don't make any mistakes, guys. Let's go through and let's solve for x. So you're solving a two-step. What would you do first? Subtract the 3. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides. And now I've got 5x is equal to negative 3. Then what would we do last? Divide by 5. So now you've got x is equal to negative 4 and negative 3/5. Okay? So now we've got our two last U tries. So go ahead and pause the video here. Try these two on your own and let's see what you get. All right. So now here we go. You should have noticed there was no GCF and that A was greater than 1. Our equation is already equal to 0. Yay. So let's go ahead and start our bottoms up, right? So now I've got x squared minus 11x plus 28 is equal to 0 from 14 times 2. Now we can set up our factoring. What two numbers multiply to get you a positive 28, but they had to add to get you negative 11? You should have gotten negative 7 and negative 4 because the two negatives when multiplied make the positive, but when adding will give you that negative. So x minus 7 and x minus 4 is equal to 0. But are we done? No, right? Because of the bottoms up, when we multiply by 2, that now means we need to divide by 2. So for the first, you bottoms up, so 2x minus 7, and then now you can also divide evenly, so x minus 2 is equal to 0. Now for the second one, that's easy, right? Because it's just x minus 2 is equal to 0. So I know from here, x is going to equal positive 2. But notice how I'm going to set this up, right? So 2x minus 7 is equal to 0, and let's solve for x. Add the 7 to both sides. So I've got 2x is equal to 7, and then of course divide by 2. You do get x is equal to 2, and x is equal to 7 over 2. Now for 3e, there were a couple things you had to do first, right? We have parentheses, so first we needed to distribute. So x times x is x squared, and 8 times x, 8x. That is equal to 20. Now notice our equation always has to equal what? 0. So then what were you supposed to do? Subtract the 20. I've got x squared plus 8x minus 20 is equal to 0. Now notice how a is equal to 1. So here we go. I'm going to go straight to my table. What numbers multiply to get you negative 20 and add to get you 8? So notice how you should have gotten positive 10 but negative 2. They would multiply to get you the negative, but 10 plus the negative 2 is going to get you positive 8. So x plus 10 and x minus 2 is equal to 0. But is that your answer? Positive 10, negative 2? No. So guess what? I'm going to go ahead and cross off D because I know that's not my answer. Those who just want to go ahead and switch it up, right? Or just immediately go to the answer. Remember, because it's equal to 0, that is x plus 10 is equal to 0. That is x minus 2 is equal to 0. So you have to subtract the 10. So that gives you negative 10. So I know it's not B, right? Because I need negative 10. But here you need a add 2 or positive 2. So I have negative 10 and positive 2. So you should have gotten C.